Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time you're listening to the podcast. This is Click Gaming's weekly podcast. I say weekly, even though we missed last week, but we're here now. Chance over there, am I right?
Click Gaming's mostly weekly podcast.
Weekly podcast, except for when we
Almost
missed.
weekly podcast.
Yeah, almost.
Sometimes weekly podcast.
Well, we were sitting here and we're like, well, we need to skip a week. We're running out of headspace. Well, maybe not Chance. Some of us are running out of headspace on just thinking. We don't have as much hard drive space. But anyways, we're going to talk about VR. Need to upgrade. But we're going to talk about VR.
Questioning if I had enough hard drive space to record the podcast without cleaning out this last week's tournaments. I haven't gone through and checked up on last week's tournaments to be sure that all the files are good, so I hate to delete the source footage. 1.3 terabytes of source footage.
Hey, let me check and see how much I'm up to on my Google Drive space. 12.5 terabytes.
Perfect. Well, I just deleted, once I go through the footage, I'll delete 1.3 terabytes of source footage off my PC. And you go back there and clean up some source footage off of some of the old tournaments.
Yeah, Johnny couldn't make it this week or tonight. He's got family in town, so we'll let him pass. But like I said, we're going to talk about VR. Chance recently started digging into VR, I guess, or have you always been kind of fascinated with it?
Well, fascinated the right word, but maybe intrigued would be the right word. Like interested enough, but not necessarily like crazy nuts about VR, but like interested enough.
Like you're not keeping up on all the tweets of like, oh, so-and-so is going to release the new VR headset next week or whatever.
I haven't been on Twitter in at least 4 months, so no, not looking at tweets.
Okay, well,
but
that's kind of how I gauge people on how involved they are in the community.
Then I'm not involved in any community. If the gauge is if you watch.
I'm not just saying Twitter. I'm saying like you subscribe to that like weekly magazine or monthly magazine or whatever, or online journal. Like I would say I'm pretty involved in NBA stuff just because I have like post notifications on for like Woj and some other Twitter accounts. But that's kind of like that's how I stay up to date. So, keeps me familiar with players and stuff, but that's neither here nor there. But you got what headset did you get recently?
An Oculus Rift S. So I wanted a cheap headset, and I was about to go with an HTC Vive, but it turned out the Oculus Rift S was cheaper. So I wanted to go with something just cheap enough I could have a headset, and it was good enough and cheap enough that I picked it up. It's the newest Oculus Rift that's PC powered. So they have a Quest and a Rift. The Quest is like a standalone, or the Rift is you plug in your PC. So I wanted the PC version.
Okay.
Even though I have like a RX 580 with 4 gigs of VRAM or something, a video card from like 5 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. Getting pretty old now, but
well, that's on that rig. I mean, your main rig, you got a lot beefier, right?
It's a Quadro. The one I'm recording is on the Quadro P2000, okay. So like same era. It's pretty powerful in the sense of like the video encoders. It's got like I think 2 or 3 video encoders, and NVIDIA is like, I don't know, NVIDIA is like crazy about releasing features and you not paying for them. So they don't like releasing features on their GeForce, like their gamer stuff, if they can charge you triple or something and put it on a Quadro. So it's a Quadro P2000. They're NVENC encoders for H.264 encoding. They lock you on your, like if you're just have a gaming card, a GeForce card, you're locked to one thing using the encoder at once. So you can only encode or decode one, or I say encode. You can only encode and decode one thing at a time. The Quadro series, and especially once you got into the P2000 and newer and higher, of course, you can go up P3000, 4000, of course, but you can do multiple encodings. So like I can have 2 or 3 encodings going all at once with real-time H.264 encoding. So that's how I handle like the Twitch stream and encoding 4-hour recordings, so we can have a higher bit rate on recordings. So it's powerful, but in its own little way. Like the 580 might beat it in gaming, but like it's more powerful in what we use it for video processing.
So it might not actually be better for VR, is what you're saying.
Yeah, probably not. I think it does have. It may have. It's got 5 gigs of VRAM, so it does a little more VRAM.
Okay,
but
so slightly
no,
better.
I'm guessing that that the 580 will beat it, even though it's got a little more VRAM.
So you got that, and what did you? I mean, you played what? Factorio in it. Factorio is a game that Chance and I play together. The only video
it's the
game
worst.
Chance
Don't
plays.
play it. Don't play it. It's the worst. But yeah, I did a little bit in it. I've had I've played with VR headsets before, but never had one of my own. This is the first time having one of my own. But yeah, I mean, I played around with it. I did that like the intro. So they had like an intro game you played where it was like, hey, learn how to use the controllers and learn how to use like all this stuff. It was like Wally style. There's like a Wally style robot that you were interacting with. That was like handing you stuff, and it's kind of cute. But did that, and then I downloaded this virtual desktop. So kind of my interest in VR, since I'm not really big on the gaming side, my interest in VR is more of the productivity side, or the actual or using it for more than just video gaming. So I use a program called Virtual Desktop, which you can put your screen essentially, it mirrors your desktop screen in virtual reality, which it's not like you would ever use it, but it's just kind of like the first step into productivity in VR. Their bigger selling point is like you can do like you can sit in a movie theater or something, so you can mirror your screen, so you can watch a movie or like Netflix or Hulu or whatever. Right? You just pull it up on your monitor, open it up in Chrome, and hit play. Well, it's mirrored into VR, and so you can be sitting in a movie theater or sitting on the side of an ocean or in a space galaxy, floating and watching a movie or whatever. That's kind of the more typical use case for it right now. But anyway, the idea, kind of why I'm interested again, is productivity. So right now, virtual reality headsets are high def in a sense that it's better than we've ever had, but also they're not super high def. So like the Rift S, we've been at basically the same resolution on VR headsets for the past 3 or 4 years. So ever since the HTC Vive came out, we've been to basically the same resolution on VR headsets, which is kind of sucky because like the better the resolution, the better the picture quality is going to be, right? Same way if you're gaming, right? Higher resolutions, you get better picture quality. And when you're playing a video game, pixels aren't quite as important. You know, like playing in VR, like you can they're fine for most gaming with the current pixel density. But you start getting a productivity and that screen door effect. So they call it a screen door effect, where you can see the individual pixels. It gets pretty bad. So you blow up your monitor where you can see it and stuff. Like you're sitting there counting pixels. Like, oh, there's 7 pixels to make up that T. And you're like, if I can count the pixels in a T, we have a problem, So that's kind of where it's at. Is like the pixel density is not quite high enough yet for real productivity work. I did sit around. I did do some work in it. I probably spent 30, 45 minutes trying to like be productive in it, writing some software, which was fine. But the monitor definitely wasn't as big as I'm used to. I mean, Evan can see my setup. I usually run a big 4K monitor, and then right now I'm rocking one 4K and then one 1440p, and then of course my laptop 1080p screen. But I rock a 4K, 32-inch 4K, and which means I have plenty of real estate I do software development, so having a lot of screen real estate is important. You got 17 browsers and 3 Excel spreadsheets open, and code editor, and a couple terminals, couple terminals, and Teams. All the fun stuff, email. It all takes up some desktop space. So, big monitors are nice. But anyway, that's kind of my current issue with it, is you don't have enough screen real estate. But the exciting part is, and kind of why I'm kind of more interested in it again, is that Pimax came out with a super high resolution. And I say super high, it's like normal resolution for most monitors, but like pretty high resolution for what VR can handle. So they're calling it the 8K Max, 8KX. something like that. It's dual 4K screens. So currently you're rocking in VR like dual 2K screens, or what we call 2K, 2560 by 1440. So each eye has a 2560 by 1440 monitor. Pimaxes will be each eye has a 3840 by 2160 monitor. So each eye has got a 4K monitor, which gives you a lot. I mean, it's what is it, like 50 or 60% more pixels. So you get quite a few more pixels there. So the screen door effect would be a lot better. And so it's probably almost getting to the point where you could use it for productivity work. So you could actually have a big enough monitor in VR to do productivity work, which is kind of where I'm interested in, which is comes back to I wanted basically the cheapest working headset I could find to get started and be sure, like, just to kind of get the feel of it and kind of see how everything worked. And then I may pony up and buy the Pimax 8K essentially eventually. We'll just kind of see.
Well, I was going to say, kind of for those at home, if you don't know what the screen door effect is, that's the first time I've heard it that way, but try going up to your 1080 monitor and looking at it, a few inches away from your face.
Get really close to your monitor. Yeah. You'll see just crosshatches of all the pixels, right? So each pixel is a square, and when you can see each square, it kind of looks like you're looking through a screen door. The screen door is pretty big screen holes, right? Like, you think about your screen door at your house, when you look through that, you can see all the little squares, right? That's what it looks like essentially when you get too close to a monitor. I don't have a high enough pixel density.
And then I was going to say, it's not really an issue normally for us because we're, 16, 20 inches away from your monitor.
Right. Well, I mean,
but like if you have a 60-inch TV at your house and you're, 18 inches away from that, okay, you're going to notice a little bit more that effect. And I mean, those monitors or I guess the VR headset is like what, 6 inches, 4 inches away from your face or from your eyes?
For eye? No, it's like an inch and a half.
Yeah. So okay, I've never worn one, but
yeah, it's right up against
it's
your
so
eye.
Close that if you moved it 6 inches away, you probably wouldn't notice it, or it'd be obviously a lot harder to notice.
Right, but then you'd have a 6-inch thing that's huge off your face, right? Like,
yeah.
But so they put it really close to your eye, but if you look through a lens, and that lens, I don't remember all the physics behind it, but that lens makes it look like the screen's a lot further away. So you're not focusing an inch and a half away from your eye, because focusing an inch and a half away from your eye is pretty hard. The actual focal point's behind the screen. And so you may remember some physics stuff, like the focal point. The lenses put the focal point behind the screen. So because the lenses put the focal point behind the screen, you're actually looking a couple of feet away for your focal point. So it's a comfortable focal distance instead of like trying to focus an inch away from your eye. So they have some cute lenses that help out a lot with the fact that things so close.
Yeah. That was supposed to be the easiest sections of Physics 2, and I did the worst on those. Only because they said, "Oh, it's the easiest section of Physics 2." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I didn't study.
I won't pay attention.
I won't study, and then I failed.
Yeah. Well, long story short is the focal point is where your eyes have to focus on in order to actually see a clear image. And so by putting the focal point a couple feet away behind the screen, your eyes can focus a couple feet away, even though they're actually looking at something very close.
Yeah, like a parabola, that kind of stuff.
Right, because you would have quite a bit of eye strain, like your eyes trying to focus. I mean, I don't even know, like, you'd focus an inch and a half away normally, you'd end up with pretty bad eye strain if you you just straight up had to focus on the monitor that close. So anyway, they put some cute lenses in there to make it where you don't have as much eye strain.
And something you said when we were talking about when you first got it, when you're doing work, like whether it's for yourself or social media or any kind of work that you're doing, having one monitor, you might get it might be 50% efficient.
Well, one monitor is the baseline, right, and everything else will add productivity on top of it.
So
that's a one.
You add another monitor, you add 30%, 20% more productivity because you have more screen space. You can have multiple tabs open, look at two things at once. Instead of having to flip between two different tabs. And then adding a third monitor is a little bit less efficient, but you still add some. And so you were saying that going into VR with two screens can be, 10% more effective than it would be in the real world.
Right. Yeah. So the productivity, right? If you have more monitors, like kind of their go-to thing it's logarithmic, right? So exponential, whatever the heck it is. It goes like this. It starts here, goes up quite a bit. Oops, I'm getting the frame. It goes up quite a bit and starts leveling out, right? As you get a lot of diminishing returns the more you get. So yeah, like two screens is 30% or 40% more productive than a single screen. And like 3 screens is another 15%, and 4 screens is like 10%, and 5 screens is like 2% or something. Once you get past 3 or 4 screens, it's hard for most people to get much more productivity boost out, just because you're trying to remember what's on what monitor and stuff. So there's like a diminishing returns there. But if you're in VR, you have more than just physical monitor real estate. You have spatial, like spacious. You can lay out things in 3D space, and so it's essentially the most productive you can be as far as screen real estate, because you have not only screen real estate of like I can put something on this square, but I can also put things further away from me. I can put things closer to me. I can put things pretty much anywhere I want to put them. Like kind of the idea would be like if I want to put my instant messenger down and I just look down, right? So I'm working on something in front of me, but then I get an instant message. I just look down. There's my instant messenger. It's always like in that spot, and I can type and then go back up to what I was doing. Or like emails maybe in the bottom left, and so it's always in the bottom left. So you just like after a little bit you get kind of muscle memory, like you just intuitively know where email's at, so you always go down there for email. Or maybe your Spotify or music you're listening to is in the top right, so just intuitively you need to change the song or something, you go and you can go up to the top right and act on that, but never have to move it or minimize the window, put it behind something, right? Then try to find it. Because you will do some of that. There'll be some like what you're working on, you won't be able to fit it all, and so like there will be some movement of windows and like rearranging stuff as you're working. But a lot of the stuff that you minimize and have to go find a lot will just be in a good spot where you don't have to worry about it, think about it. So you being able to utilize this whole space, and like you can think of a lot of different interesting use cases, right? Maybe you have right now we have kind of virtual desktops and stuff. Like you could have 2 or 3 different virtual desktops, and kind of the idea behind that is, well, you'd have one for like your work area, and then one for like you're sitting at home, like you're researching something, watching some YouTube or something. You have multiple different workspaces that allows you to not minimize and close things as you're switching tasks. Maybe just task switch. Maybe like you have an email, an instant messenger, a bit of desktop, and everybody kind of has a little bit of. Anybody that uses a virtual desktop will have a ton of opinions on how to use virtual desktops, but they're not widely used, just because it's hard enough for us to track what's on a couple monitors, like you remember what's where. But like you start tracking multiple monitors on multiple different workspaces, like you end up with just a mess. But like I think with VR, you might be able to take that to a whole other extreme of like maybe in front of you is your normal workspace, but then you hit a button and it rearranges everything and puts your second workspace. And because everything's spatially organized as well, it might be an easier way to keep everything kind of in one spot, right? So like you're working in VR, trying to send emails, do whatever you do, working on Excel spreadsheet or whatever. While you hit your lunch break, or maybe while you're eating lunch, you kick back and watch some Netflix or something, right? So you just flip over to your Netflix workspace or whatever, watch some Netflix, sitting in a movie theater or whatever. And then once your lunch break's up, you kick back and go back to what you're doing without having to minimize and close everything. That's another potential thing, is like being able to organize. You have a lot more options for being organized, because it's just like your desk, right? You can organize things like on your desk of like, oh, I want this here, I want my pencils over there, I want my calculator over here, my phone goes here. That whole spatial thing you're used to in real life, you get it in VR. Post-it notes, you can put post-it notes wherever you want, like typing up post-it notes, sticking them everywhere, there's a lot of potentials. And you can keep going, put stuff right above you, you put stuff below you, put stuff behind you.
Well, when you're switching between not necessarily workspaces, but just like tabs, I guess, or applications, do you have to like click? Like, are you clicking with your mouse, or are you clicking with your handles, or
so
you can blink twice, and you blink really fast and it switches to that application? Like,
you do get a lot more options with how to maneuver stuff. The controllers and stuff are kind of interesting. I don't think we're going to stick with controllers once we go like kind of productivity oriented. I think we're going to stick with keyboards and mice, and then your hands. So user interfaces are awful, and we haven't come up with a much better way than a keyboard to interface with a computer. A keyboard is one of the most efficient ways to interface with a computer, and so because it's one of the most efficient ways, it's going to be hard.
To beat that
You're
efficiency.
hard pressed to beat a keyboard, right? Because like you get good with it, even a QWERTY keyboard, you get good with it. I mean, you're talking 50, 60 words a minute that you can enter into a computer, and so that speed is very hard to mimic if you remove keys. And so like the fact you can type that fast is because there's so many keys and you can use basically all 10 fingers to operate on the keys. And so what you start taking controllers, you start doing spatial stuff, like it becomes a lot harder to mimic the 100 and something 104 keys or whatever in a standard QWERTY keyboard. And so we haven't come up with a good way. I'm not going to say it's impossible to come up with a better solution than a keyboard, but until we get a freaking chip planted in our head, a keyboard is the most efficient way to interface with a computer. So it's probably going to stick with a keyboard or mouse, and maybe like hand trackers or something. So like you could reach up and like move something around or like expand something, drag, zoom. Some of that basic stuff you would do on a touchscreen. Probably similar in VR would be the interface would be similar to a touchscreen, and so you could like operate on things to a certain extent, but then you're going to eventually go back to a keyboard or mouse because like
you got to type stuff and you got to move.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to sit there and poke and peck on a virtual keyboard. Like the tactile feedback means you can type a lot quicker on a like touch typing, right? Tactile keyboard. So I don't foresee it going anywhere other than a keyboard and mouse for a while. So like for all the hunt and peck people, like and we'll probably have some sort of camera or something. Like you look down, it tracks your fingers, and like it overlays it on a keyboard or something. So like even the poke and peck people will be able to like know where keys where and stuff. But yeah, currently I think a keyboard or mouse is where we're gonna live at for until we get a chip in our head.
Yeah, well, I mean a chip or even talking, almost vocal recognition, voice recognition, where you're like, okay, I want to type this out, and you start typing and
but that's still way more inefficient.
What pull up Word
saying
document?
Something is way more inefficient than doing it. Like we've had the ability to talk to a computer for a while. Like it's handy in a certain cases. Like I'm in the kitchen, my hands are covered in bread dough, and I need like something from Google or need something from recipe. Like okay, that's a great example of. Or like we're sitting there talking to somebody and like, oh, we'll get a question. Let's ask
Take notes
Google.
Or something.
Some of that type of stuff it's handy for, but like for actually interfacing with a computer, it's way slower, right? Because it's way slower.
You can type faster, you can think, right, or speak. I guess think and speak.
Technically, but most people can't. You have to get pretty good with QWERTY keyboard to type faster than you talk. But I mean, there's a substantial part of the population that's good with the QWERTY keyboard and they can type faster than you can talk. But a lot of the population still pokes and pecks, like hunt and peck. I'm like, oh, there's the Y. Let me hit the Y. Like, okay, yeah, speaking is way faster on their side, but because like you got to think of like, oh, like please open up the Word document. Well, now you have to describe what Word document it is. Like, oh, it's the third one from the left on my list because I have 7 Word documents open. And like, oh, will you please change the font to 24 bold and then type? Like it's so inefficient. We've been programmed at this point to like intuitively know what you want to do. If you use a computer a lot, you just intuitively know I need to take my mouse up here and change these settings. And you tend to fiddle with stuff of like, especially font sizes and stuff. Like you may not know what size you want. So it's like, computer, please change it to 30. And then, nope, 36. Nope, 38. Nope, 40. And there's a lot more thinking involved in that because it's not kind of programmed. So it would be a big learning curve as well to like think in a way where you're describing what to do to something instead of just taking the action yourself. Because you're basically asking another human being, you're interfacing with a computer through another human being. Right, like think about how annoying that would be. Because typically people don't like delegating tasks anyway, and so just trying to interface a computer. Like, if you can't hit a button on the computer and you're trying to explain to somebody else what you want to do, like it's not going to be intuitive initially for sure. And like, will it be faster? I don't think you'll ever get faster than a keyboard and mouse.
Something interesting that I saw, we had a caster a couple weeks ago that worked with BYU, and I was checking out his Twitter, and then he had retweeted something from BYU, so I went to BYU's Twitter. They tweeted something about being live. I clicked on their Twitch link, watched, and they were doing some TESPA VR esports. It was really weird. And I mean, it looked like they were playing, like, I want to say Wii games, but like not tennis, but like they were like moving
That's
their
what every
arms and
VR
stuff.
game looks like right now.
It looked like water aerobics, honestly. Like just in the room, like water. I mean, obviously they're not floating, but
Right.
water aerobics in the sense that like they're moving their arms around and like you can't really tell what's going on. Now, granted, they had like their game was full screen, I guess, and then there's a camera on the person. That was bottom left. Had them doing their movements and stuff, but they were like
Right.
working out. It was really weird. They had like some workout equipment.
Yeah. Most VR games right now are kind of cartoonish because we don't until the 30 series came out, and this is partially comes back to the resolutions and stuff. Like until 30 series cards came out, we really didn't have a graphics card that could push enough frames per second and render at a decent enough quality to make a good looking game. Like, you think about pushing two 1440p monitors running COD, right? Like, you need a minimum frame rate of 90 frames a second.
Why is 90 the?
It's
Is
about the
90
point where
arbitrary, or is that you?
no, so it's
Or
okay.
a
It's
scientific?
somewhat arbitrary, somewhat scientific. It's somewhat arbitrary if it's a round number. It's somewhat scientific as in above 80 seems to be where most people don't get motion sickness in VR because the response time is quick enough that you're like moving your head and responding. You don't get motion sickness. So when you get too slow frame rates, you can start getting motion sickness because of the time it takes from you move your head or you did a sensor input to going into the computer and rendering the new frame. Since your eyes are fully engulfed and sometimes your ears too, you can put headphones on or whatever and be pretty much cut out from the rest of the world. But that movement of your head and the delay from you moved your head to what your eyes see needs to be really, really small. And so that 5-ish milliseconds seems to be about the sweet spot of when of somebody moves their head and not get motion sickness from it. So that's kind of where.
So you should take motion sickness pills before you play a VR headset.
Yeah, and I mean, and I've never really had motion sickness. I did get motion sickness, or at least what I thought was motion sickness. I'm assuming it was motion sickness when I was playing. I loaded up a couple things and I got pretty bad frame rates in them, so I was getting pretty bad delay. I was getting like 20 frames a second or 10 frames a second, pretty low frame rates. And so like you're talking substantial lag from when like you move your head to when you get updates. And so yeah, no, like I said, I don't even know if it's like throw up motion sickness. Like I didn't feel like I was gonna throw up. I just felt like my head felt horrible. Like I had a headache and like it was just not good. But anyway, so that response time is important to not get quote unquote motion sickness, whether it's you feel like you're going to throw up or if it's just like you get a headache or like having other issues of like eyes, like having issues focusing and stuff. Like that 90-ish frames a second seems to be about the sweet spot of like we've pretty much covered and we're fine. Anything higher is better, of course, but like with our current computers, like getting down sub 4-ish milliseconds of input latency is pretty hard. So I don't know how much we're going to get with current gen stuff, even with 30 series, some of the new stuff like AMD and Intel putting out with smart memory access and stuff. Like I still don't know how much we're going to get down below, like 3-ish milliseconds of latency for VR. So yeah, the lower latency the better because like you move your head in real life, you have zero latency. Like everything just updates immediately. But in VR, we have to wait for there's some latency, right? We get a round trip from the computer.
We have latency of the machine, and then also the latency. You say zero. I mean, you have some latency in your eye. I guess it's real time to us, but
it's real time as a sense of your brain is used to whatever the delay is. So like the 2 nanosecond delay or whatever for the light to change. Like your brain is used to that delay, so you've already kind of pre-calculated that delay, and you're fine with that. But when you add 5, you're talking about several orders of magnitude more delay when you're talking about 60. If you're talking 60 hertz, or like 13 milliseconds a frame, so that's a minimum minimum latency that you could have is 13 milliseconds. So like you're talking multiple orders of magnitude over what you would typically get for just like the latency of like the electron of light hitting your eyeball and turning into an electron going up your nerve into your brain. Like,
well, for others, I'm sure. I obviously know this answer, but I'm going to try to answer it myself. I feel like some people at home might be saying like, "Well, why do normal games when I get motion sickness?" Normal games because like most consoles and stuff are 60 FPS, and my initial thought is because you're not like physically moving your body, like you're not moving like in VR you move your head, and there's latency. But for a video game, like a normal video game, for a Call of Duty instance or whatever, you're moving your thumb. You're not moving your whole body. Am I correct? Kind of in that assumption. I mean, we're not doctors,
Ish,
but
ish. It's not necessarily that. It's the fact of your environment, right? So you are moving your head some. You're always moving a little bit. Like your environment, what you're seeing is always changing slightly. Our eyes are just, and I don't know if this is adapted or what's like our brains work this way, but like we understand the fact that this monitor's in front of us and it's not updating very fast. The motion sickness comes into play when like you're moving, but like what your eyes are seeing is not moving, which is why you usually get motion sickness in a car or you get motion sickness on a boat because your body's moving and you like that inside of your ears, you understand you're moving, but what you're seeing isn't moving. And so that disconnect of you're physically moving, except what you're seeing is not moving, that's what causes what we call motion sickness. And so right, you still see all the stuff around you, around your screen,
the border and the
borders
your
and lights
environment,
and walls and everything else around it,
control. Yeah.
keyboard, mouse, like everything else around it works as we expect. The monitor technically doesn't work as much as we expect because it's a lot slower update, but because pretty much everything works, like 80% of your peripheral works correctly, you don't get motion sickness. But like I said, in things like cars, if you can't see the outside of something, but you're moving, that's where people get motion sickness a lot. And so the same concept in VR because you can't see anything other than what the headset is showing you. You literally are cut off from the world. So that's the same thing of like you're inside of a boat, you have no windows or anything, but you're moving, and so like that's where the motion sickness comes from. Is what you're seeing isn't computing. Motion sickness is your brain saying something doesn't compute. What is going on here? Something doesn't add up.
So you were playing with VR what a couple days ago. You were playing what you? It wasn't even you were playing. You were doing what? Google Maps.
Yeah, Google Earth's
What
got a
was
pretty
that?
sweet VR setup. So you can go on Google Earth and download the software and play in it. But you can go anywhere on a globe. So you can literally just spin the globe around and click a point. It'll, it'll dump you right in that area. They do. So Google has kind of been going down this path of like building 3D models. So I think they have enough satellite imagery to kind of build decent 3D models of things. So like you're walking around a city, like you can see, like I say, if you're hovering above a city, like you can see buildings come up, you can see like mountains and different terrain and stuff, trees and stuff like that. It's not amazing rendering, but it's pretty good for satellite image, like piecing it all together. But you can also like change the time of day, so like you can like change where shadows are at and stuff. But you can also do Street View, so they also drop you in Street View, and Google records 360 degrees views when they drive their cars around for Street View, so you can get dumped in like you're standing on the street, in Buenos Aires or New York or Europe, somewhere in London. Anyway, you can get dumped right in there, literally in a Street View. So it's pretty good picture. It's like pretty high res. You look at Street View on your phone, right? You're just inside it, and you look around, and you can see the whole picture from street whatever that car took in Street View. And so you literally go wherever you want. Like you sit there, like you can read his phone number on the side of a business. It's like you're standing right in front of it. So
Ordering a pizza, Huh.
yeah, you can literally go like down the street, look at the pizza place, and read their phone number and order pizza from there. So anyway, so it dumps you right in. So anyway, so you got a pretty sweet setup. You can also float around in space and like move the Earth around and kind of look around, and you can choose time of day. So like Antarctica, you can go wherever you want. The renderings are some great. So like Mount Everest, I hop on Mount Everest. The renderings are like ish okay. I'm assuming because it's kind of hard to get pictures of Mount Everest. I'm sure most of it's usually covered in clouds and stuff, so they probably don't have as many photos. A lot of like the bigger cities and stuff, they have a lot more photos of from satellites, so it's easier for them to build a better model of it in 3D. But it's pretty impressive stuff. especially places where they have plenty of data to grab off of. It's pretty impressive. And then hopping into Street View is like a whole nother level of like, this is freaking nuts.
So, what kind of FPS can you expect on just a headset right now? Like say a middle of the road headset.
So pretty much all headsets hit the 90 frames per second threshold, just because that's literally the threshold you have to do for most of the population to play it. Like we were talking about motion sickness, if you get much below 90, most of the population can have issues playing with or using that headset. And so the headsets themselves usually support 90 frames per second. There are some high frame rate ones to go at 120 frames a second. Like Pimax has some 120. Pimax has kind of been the fast refresh and high res competitor recently in VR. But that's really where most things are at, is the 90 frames per second ish range. But then it really depends on your graphics card and what you're rendering, right? So like if you're rendering pretty simple stuff, not a big deal, not the end of the world to render 90 frames a second, because for both eyes, right? So like, but if you're trying to render, you go try to play COD and virtual reality, like you're gonna have issues keeping up 90 frames a second. So like, it's very hardware dependent, which is why people usually like get whatever the most you can buy, like whatever the highest end GPU you can afford is, get that, and then but actually save up and get the better one for later, because like you can never have too powerful of a GPU at this point. 20 series was kind of good enough for most things, like a 2080 or something, 2080 Ti. Like you can pretty well get around in most VR stuff pretty well, not have to worry about frame rates. But as headsets get more pixels, we start pushing, if we start trying to get 120 frames a second, or just like we'll get better quality games, higher detail textures, stuff like that, you're gonna have to really step up your graphics card to be able to play those. So now that we got 30 series, you can get a 3070 and probably be pretty good for VR. So like now that we're getting some pretty serious graphics cards, I expect for all the VR companies to kind of step up and like we're gonna get higher texture games, we're gonna get higher pixel displays. So like Pimax is kind of the first person, but everybody's going to follow once 30 series becomes popular, because we can now drive the dual 4Ks or whatever we need for higher pixel densities and the high refresh rate. We were also waiting on display standards. So the 2560 by 1440 per eye, kind of the go-to resolution for current gen headsets, and turns them out to be the best term. They're probably going to release stuff early next year. Now that we've kind of technology's kind of caught up a little bit. So current gen is right now, but the stupid HTC Vive came out 3 years ago, and that's still current gen. But anyway, display standards, like so DisplayPort 1.2, like that was pretty much the maximum you could carry on one DisplayPort cable. So like you'd have to flip to 2 DisplayPort cables if you wanted higher resolutions and higher frame rates. So we kind of had several different technology limitations that we've kind of surpassed at this point. We've got DisplayPort 1.4, 1.4a, so we're getting to where we can support more. So now that we can support more, the technology is catching up. Now they can go and make higher res screens and keep pushing further and further.
Well, my question after that, I guess, follow up was like, do we see people like competing in esports with headsets on, playing a normal like say Call of Duty? Like, does that give you an advantage?
Oh, definitely, because you're in the world. You're gonna have to try this headset on. I know you've never done VR. You're gonna try this headset on. It's a different.
Well, I'm not saying like
world.
you put the headset on and you like look around. I'm saying like the monitors being right in your eye. Does that give you an advantage if you can match the same frame rate and graphics, I guess?
It gives you an advantage because it's no longer fake 3D. It's still kind of fake 3D, but it's basically not fake 3D anymore. So like currently with 3D, we are rendering a screen that is our best guess at how to render a 3D image, to which your eyes can understand that that thing is further away than what you're looking at up close. However, in VR, we go one step further of like your eye actually focused on the object at whatever distance. So instead of the focal point not changing, the focal point will change with where things are at. So currently, if you're looking at a screen, you got one focal point for the whole screen. But like once you get into VR, your eyes actually have to change their focal point. So just like you're looking in real life, like you're looking up close at a building, like on your right, like you got a building like 20, 30 feet away, you're looking at a window. Well, then you look at a building 300-400 feet away, like your eye focal point actually changes, right? So it feels a lot more like you're actually in the world than it does when you're looking at a 3D interpretation of a world, because you're actually in the world. So that ability to, and eye movement and stuff, like it becomes more like the real world. And so it's a lot closer approximation of what something would look like. And so, will it give you an advantage? Yes, it would be an advantage over somebody that's staring at a monitor, but also like is an advantage in general? Probably not, because everybody's going to be in it. You also get more peripheral stuff, peripheral vision, right? So since you're engulfing your whole vision, you see a lot more around your peripheral, and so like you can see movement out of the corner of your eye. Whereas if you're on a monitor, you get to bump up your FOV or something and try to squeeze as much on the monitor as you can. In this case, where you actually see full 180 degrees field of view, so you can capture more stuff out of the corner of your eye. So it'd be similar to the real world, right? So whereas somebody that's better with focusing on something in front of them, people that have better focus on peripheral or can see more of the peripheral things may have an advantage in certain situations where, they can catch some out of the corner of their eye, whereas somebody else that's used to staring at a screen won't be able to catch that type of thing. So it just becomes right to the real world.
Because like I'm thinking like at a LAN, you set everybody else with the PC, they plug their controller in or their keyboard and mouse,
right,
and then they plug in their VR headset, they set their VR headset on, and they play with their controller in front of them while looking through VR. I'm not, because like looking around like 360 right now seems kind of dumb for an esport. I mean, obviously that'd be really cool, like if you're running around in real life, but I feel like that defeats a little bit of the purpose of video games, being that I play a video game of doing things that like okay, maybe possible, but like on a sustainable level, it's not possible. Like from a physical standpoint, it's not possible. Like the movements and stuff, and
right.
So like you get too realistic, nobody's gonna play it because it's not fun, because it's too much like real life, is what I'm saying. And like these kind of like Call of Duty.
But like Call of Duty, like in real life, you can't die 700 times, right? Like
you're right, yes.
And like your user interface is a lot more intuitive when you're in VR, right? So you're not going to be using a controller in VR. You're not going to be using your regular Xbox controller in VR, right? You'll have dedicated controllers. So kind of like the Wii kind of try to do. Like you're gonna have, if you play Call of Duty, you're gonna have a thing shaped like a gun that you're actually carrying around and you use to point and aim, right? You actually take this thing, shoot, point and aim with your gun. So like,
well, I was saying before that step, like you're still using a controller, you just have a VR headset instead of a monitor.
Yeah, like, I think those are going to come at the same time.
Advantage? Okay.
I think those will both come at the same time. When you actually jump into VR, the controllers will match VR, right? So the user interface will match. I don't think you're going to be I mean, yeah, maybe there are some games like if you go on a throwback or something, you play with a controller, but like most things, the user interface is going to come with a VR. So right now we've got like controllers and stuff that come with the headsets, and so like they're more of a VR style. So currently that's how you do shooting games and stuff, is you take the controllers and you don't have a physical gun to hold, but you kind of hold them like you'd hold a gun. And so you point and aim and you pull the trigger or whatever and shoot. And so the user interface will be a lot more intuitive when you're in VR. So the actual reaction of you moving your body, turning and shooting, instead of you trying to like memorize and get, instead of the whatever it's called, muscle memory, right? So instead of the muscle memory of like you hit a couple keys on a keyboard, or you move your mouse around, or like you move a joystick, like instead of that muscle memory, you have your full muscle memory of your whole body. And so that twist and turn to shoot is a full body muscle memory instead of just like a thumb muscle memory type thing. So your user interface is a lot more intuitive with how the real world works. And so you're gonna, like, you think people look good right now, wait till we get into VR when they actually can use their whole body. They're gonna be some crazy people. People that are playing with a controller are not going to be able to compete.
I feel like you have to be really fit.
Not necessarily, because you're not going to be running, right? So you're probably still like, people are making like running contraptions we can run in place, but like most of your gameplay will probably still won't be running. You'll probably have a joystick on the back of your gun or whatever to actually like move around the world, but your movement of your body is what's actually going to be, to aim and shoot or whatever you need to do in the game. Your whole body movement will be mirrored in just your movement, like you're running or something.
So like you're on
will
Minecraft,
be a joystick.
actually physically moving your pickaxe
Yeah.
instead of pressing
Instead
the
of pressing
right
A or whatever, whatever you would hit.
or left clicking. Yeah.
So anyway, but people will be more fit if we actually do this correctly, right? Because you won't be sitting in a chair doing nothing. You'll actually be using your body. So plus side of VR is you will be slightly in better shape. Will you be in amazing shape? Not just from VR, but like, will you be 700 pounds? A little harder to play VR if you're 700 pounds. So like just the fact you're moving your body will be a big step
like
forward.
You're moving, yeah.
Yeah.
You're moving your body. You're not just sitting in your chair like I do every day.
Maybe it'll be the saving grace for America. VR.
I was thinking maybe the next step was like everybody has VR headsets and they play with a controller, like a normal Xbox controller or whatever. But I mean, I also see people like they make 3D printed guns or whatever, or replicants of the gun, and that's how you play. But I feel like that would be farther off. But
right, but I mean, it's not that far off, right? We currently have like these are controllers that come with your wherever the camera's at, come with your HTC Rift or not, come with your Oculus Rift. So these are controllers I got, right? So they got a thing you hold them or whatever, and they got a button on the side, and if I can get it in frame. Anyway, they got a trigger and they got a button on the side. Like the button on the side is like grab something, and like the trigger is whatever the trigger's for. They got a couple buttons on the inside. You can hit in there and joystick to drive around. So like that's currently, and they track your hand movements, right? So you reach over and you grab something, pick it up. You get your gun, you pull the trigger, whatever, and this follows your front. Just aim just like a gun, right? So you move your front one around. That's kind of where the gun's pointing. You move the back one, it can move a little bit too. So anyways, that's kind of what we have is something like this. The Vives are a little bit different. Everybody kind of has their own secret sauce for how they make the controllers, but something along the lines of this where you can put in your hands and you have, somewhat user interface. In the near future, we'll have hand tracking, and so you won't even need a controller. Or, maybe you just have a button, you just have like a model that's like a dumb model, and that's your controller or whatever, but also it tracks your hand. Anyway, that's kind of where we're at is the user interface is updating with the headsets as well. So it's kind of going to come at the same spot, came at the same time.
I feel like the controllers could be made now. Like you could.
Oh yeah, the technology for controller is there. The problem is the headset. That's currently where technology is lagging. Is the headset.
They could 3D print a gun with the buttons on the side and stuff, and
sure, or holders for these. I've seen people like 3D print holders especially on the Vive. So the Vive is kind of a more popular, been around a little longer. So I've seen the Vive controllers. I've seen people 3D print all sorts of different controllers, like steering wheels from Mario Kart, that type of stuff. I
know for like Wii, they had like where your controller slides in.
Yeah, same thing. Just holds onto the controller that has the tracking devices in it.
Yeah. I honestly learned quite a bit about VR because I knew zero. But I think you want to wrap it up here. Do you have anything else you want to say about VR or headsets or handsets, controllers, I guess?
I don't know. We can make a part 2 next week.
Yeah. If we come up with anything, for sure. Anyways, Chance, Evan here. Thank you guys. It's been Click Gaming's weekly podcast or somewhat weekly podcast. We'll catch you. Almost weekly podcast. We'll catch you next week or the week after.
We're going to trademark the almost weekly podcast. That's a Click Gaming thing now.
Hey, TM.
Just kidding. Use it whatever you want.
But just tag us. No. Okay. Anyways, thank you guys so much. We'll catch you next time. Peace.